Hey guys, it's Ellie. Welcome back to Bite-Sized Book of Mormon. I'm glad to have you with me. So, if you've never been here before, this is just a podcast where I read through one chapter of the Book of Mormon each episode, and I give a little bit of context, a little bit of insight, a little bit of good times, so stick around. So, if you remember last episode, we read Helaman chapter 16, which is basically the aftermath of the prophet Samuel the Lamanite's words to the Nephites. He had been speaking for the 3 chapters before that, and the last chapter was basically what happened next. There were some Nephites that did actually convert and went to Nephi to go get baptized, but a lot of them dug in their heels. Even after miracles started happening, prophecies started being fulfilled, angels started visiting people, they dug in their heels. So that's why I titled last episode, Signs Don't Work, because, well, they didn't. God was giving people signs, and they continued to dig in their heels. So anyways, let's see if they get better or get worse as we begin a new book in 3rd Nephi, chapter 1. Now it came to pass that the 91st year had passed away, and it was 600 years from the time that Lehi left Jerusalem, and it was in the year that Laconius was the chief judge and the governor over the land. And Nephi, the son of Helaman, had departed out of the land of Zarahemla, giving charge unto his son Nephi, who was his eldest son, concerning the plates of brass, and all the records which had been kept, and all those things which had been kept sacred from the departure of Lehi out of Jerusalem. Then he departed out of the land, and whither he went no man knoweth, and his son Nephi did keep the records in his stead, yea, the record of this people. Guys, it was literally last episode where I talked about how fun it was when major Book of Mormon figures just kind of disappear. Why does this keep happening? Because Nephi, which is the son of Helaman, just left. And in verse 3 it says, whither he went no man knoweth. They don't even know where he went. At least for Alma the Younger, or Elder, I can't remember which, he was going to a specific city and he just never arrived. But Nephi, he just kind of left. Just kind of went off on his way. Maybe he realized that, it was his time. I don't know. But anyways, so now we're on our 3rd Nephi. So not only are we in the book of 3rd Nephi because this is the 3rd book of Nephi in the Book of Mormon, because earlier we had 1st and 2nd Nephi, but this is also the 3rd person named Nephi. The first 2 books of Nephi were actually written by the same Nephi, the 1st Nephi, and then this last Nephi that just kind of dipped in the wilderness was the 2nd Nephi, and now his son, he also named Nephi because the Book of Mormon is not confusing enough, is now the 3rd Nephi. And so I guess it makes sense that this record starts with him. Last episode, if you remember, I mentioned that it was weird that the book was changing to 3rd Nephi now, because Nephi had already been the prophet for who knows how long. But yeah, it actually is a different Nephi. I 100% forgot that there were just more Nephis to be had. So anyways, we're on Nephi number 3 and Book of Nephi number 3. And yeah, his dad just kind of dipped. And he now has the sacred records. He's the next steward in the long chain of stewards that are holding the records that make up what will eventually become the Book of Mormon. So anyways, what is this new Nephi gonna do? He's in Zarahemla now, alone, because his dad is gone, and Laconius is the chief judge. Let's see what happens. And it came to pass that in the commencement of the 92nd year, behold, the prophecies of the prophets began to be fulfilled more fully, for there began to be greater signs and greater miracles wrought among the people. But there were some who began to say that the time was past for the words to be fulfilled, which were spoken by Samuel the Lamanite. And they began to rejoice over their brethren, saying, behold, the time is past, and the words of Samuel are not fulfilled. Therefore your joy and your faith concerning this thing hath been vain. And it came to pass that they did make a great uproar throughout the land, and the people who believed began to be very sorrowful, lest by any means those things which had been spoken might not come to pass. But behold, they did watch steadfastly for that day and that night and that day, which should be as one day, as if there were no night, that they might know that their faith had not been in vain. Now it came to pass that there was a day set apart by the unbelievers, that all those who believed in those traditions should be put to death, except the signs should come to pass, which had been given by Samuel the prophet. Now it came to pass that when Nephi, the son of Nephi, saw this wickedness of his people, his heart was exceedingly sorrowful. And it came to pass that he went out and bowed himself down upon the earth, and cried mightily to his God in behalf of his people, yea, those who were about to be destroyed because of their faith in the tradition of their fathers. Wow, quite the plot twist. Things are not gonna go well for the Nephites very soon. Unless Christ comes, which of course we know he does. But anyways, currently, where the believers in Zarahemla are at, first of all, they're in the vast minority, but there are believers that do believe in the words of Samuel the Lamanite. And if you remember, Samuel the Lamanite says 6 years and Christ will be born. Like 6. That is so specific and so close to when he was preaching. And so now the unbelievers that were there for when Samuel the Lamanite was actually on the wall are now saying, well, time has passed. It's not going to happen. Like, come on, guys, give it up. Meanwhile, while they're saying this, apparently the prophecies are being more fully fulfilled and miracles are happening more fully. And there's more wonders happening. And even amidst all this, they continue to hand wave it all. They say, well, the day, the night, and the day hasn't happened yet, and it should have, so you're going to die. And what's even more intense and terrifying is that they set a date that if it doesn't happen by then, all the believers will die. There are stakes now. This matters for people's lives now. It's no longer just a belief that you can just kind of have or not have and it doesn't really matter. It matters because it's going to be tested, right? Do you have enough faith to stay stalwart until literally the day that you are slated to die for your beliefs? Are you willing to stick by your beliefs while the inevitable march of time moves slowly forward, closer and closer to what may very well be your end date? And I mean, obviously you have faith that it won't be, but still, what if Christ was going to come a few days after the given date? What if? They don't know. I personally would find it really hard to stay a believer in this circumstance. Like, you're gonna die based on a certain day. Oh my gosh. And it really shows the true mettle of these believers that they didn't. And I'm sure that some did. But there were some that didn't. There were some that stayed strong all the way to the date. And obviously we're going to see what happens on said date after this Nephi finishes praying to God. But yeah, this is terrifying. This is really terrifying. Put yourself in their shoes for a moment. Imagine that there were a whole group of people that said, hey, all you that believe that the second coming is going to be soon, if it doesn't happen before this date, we are going to kill you. That is your end. It's going to be over if it doesn't happen by this date. You are looking forward to the second coming, but you don't know when it's going to be, and so you can't be sure whether it's going to be before or after that date. God doesn't tell us when it's going to happen. For the second coming, we don't have a date, like the Nephites did. We don't have a 6-year time period to kind of go off of. So, what would you do? Would you stay? Or would you, out of self-preservation, rescind your beliefs, at least until the date passed? That's a hard decision. And so that gives me so much respect for all the believers who decided to stay, Nephi included, because this is terrifying. And it came to pass that he cried mightily unto the Lord all that day, and behold, the voice of the Lord came unto him, saying, Lift up your head and be of good cheer, for behold, the time is at hand, and on this night shall the sign be given. And on the morrow come I into the world, to show unto the world that I will fulfill all that which I have caused to be spoken by the mouth of my holy prophets. Behold, I come unto my own, to fulfill all things which I have made known unto the children of men from the foundation of the world, and to do the will both of the Father and of the Son, of the Father because of me, and of the Son because of my flesh. And behold, the time is at hand, and this night shall the sign be given. And it came to pass that the words which came unto Nephi were fulfilled, according as they had been spoken. For behold, at the going down of the sun, there was no darkness. And the people began to be astonished, because there was no darkness when the night came. And there were many who had not believed the words of the prophets, who fell to the earth and became as if they were dead. For they knew that the great plan of destruction which they had laid for those who believed in the words of the prophets had been frustrated, for the sign which had been given was already at hand. And they began to know that the Son of God must shortly appear, yea, in fine, all the people upon the face of the whole earth, from the west to the east, both in the land north and in the land south, were so exceedingly astonished that they fell to the earth. For they knew that the prophets had testified of these things for many years, and that the sign which had been given was already at hand. And they began to fear because of their iniquity and their unbelief. Imagine this death date that this group has decided is inching ever closer, and your prophet, whom you look up to in every spiritual case, says, don't worry guys, I'm gonna pray to God, and we will see what happens. And he doesn't even promise anything. He doesn't promise that God is gonna come before they all die, but he's at least going to ask. Obviously, the prophet gives his will to God. He does not change the will of God. And so, as a believer, you wait, and you're terrified, because the sun begins to go down. But then you notice, wait a minute, the sky is not dimming like it should be. It's staying unnaturally bright, actually. And then it dawns on you, oh my gosh, God is real. And it is the providence of God that the death date that everyone else set just happened to be on the day that Christ would actually come. What are the chances? Imagine you're sitting there in your living room freaking out because it's potentially your last day. You don't know. And then you notice that it doesn't get dark and you just, your shoulders just drop and you just go, oh, thank goodness. And then you realize, wow, God really is real. Your faith really is validated. It is real. And then put yourself into the shoes of those who didn't believe. They heard the words of Samuel the Lamanite. They know what's going to happen to those that didn't believe. And they also know the meaning of the sign. They know what it signifies. And they knew to look out for it. And now they're being condemned for their knowledge because they knew, but they didn't act on that knowledge. They didn't apply that knowledge. And so they can be held liable for what they know. And that is terrifying to them. As it says in verse 18, they began to fear because of their iniquity and their unbelief. And also at the end of verse 17, it says, they were so exceedingly astonished that they fell to the earth. And that's referring to people all over the land. Like not just Nephites and Zarahemla, but like people all over are freaking out because it is dawning on them. Oh no, they were right. Oh no, what does this mean for me? This means that I have a soul. This means that there is a God, and this means that I'm on the wrong side. This is a very serious realization that is just falling on the shoulders of these unbelievers. How terrifying would that be? You've been making light of these believers' beliefs for a long time now, especially after Samuel the Lamanite came and gave a time frame for all this stuff to happen. You've never taken it seriously a day in your life, and then it happens. How do you deal with that? Oh my gosh, I love moments like this where there is just so much emotion. For the believers, there's this vast feeling of just relief. And also rejoicing because, the Savior of the world has been born. Like, this is amazing. This is a time of great excitement and jubilee. And also, like I said, relief. Because they aren't all going to be wholesale killed. And then for the unbelievers, it's a moment of terror. Sheer and utter terror. The cosmic kind. The kind that comes from a power higher than your own. One that you did not believe existed until that very moment. Like I said, I love moments like this. Oh my goodness. It's so fun to just put yourself into their shoes and try and understand even a small part of what it would have been like to be in your house and know that the evening is approaching. And then you glance outside and you realize, wait. Wait a minute, what does that mean? Oh man. Anyways, this is such a pivotal moment in the Book of Mormon. Christ has been born. The Savior of the world is on the earth. God has condescended to become like us in the ultimate showing of his love, to save us all from ourselves and to give us eternal second chances. This is amazing. And I'm sure that the believers in Zarahemla are only beginning to understand the ramifications of just what Christ came to do. So anyways, let's continue to read and see how people keep reacting to this literally earth-shattering event. And it came to pass that there was no darkness in all that night, but it was as light as though it was midday. And it came to pass that the sun did rise in the morning again, according to its proper order. And they knew that it was the day that the Lord should be born, because of the sign which had been given. And it had come to pass, yea, all things, every whit, according to the words of the prophets. And it came to pass also that a new star did appear according to the word. And it came to pass that from this time forth there began to be lyings sent forth among the people by Satan to harden their hearts, to the intent that they might not believe in those signs and wonders which they had seen. But notwithstanding these lyings and deceivings, the more part of the people did believe, and were converted unto the Lord. And it came to pass that Nephi went forth among the people, and also many others, baptizing unto repentance, in the which there was a great remission of sins, and thus the people began again to have peace in the land. And there were no contentions, save it were a few that began to preach, endeavoring to prove by the scriptures that it was no more expedient to observe the law of Moses. Now in this thing they did err, having not understood the scriptures. But it came to pass that they soon became converted, and were convinced of the error which they were in. For it was made known unto them that the law was not yet fulfilled, and that it must be fulfilled in every whit. Yea, the word came unto them that it must be fulfilled, yea, that one jot or tittle should not pass away, till it should all be fulfilled. Therefore in this same year were they brought to a knowledge of their error, and did confess their faults. What an interesting reaction. And something that also further proves my point that signs don't always work the way that we think they should. Because after I spend all this time describing this earth-shattering sign of Christ that is unmistakable, appeared among all the Nephites and everyone saw it, no one could have missed it, still some did not believe. Still, Satan was able to deceive the hearts of some, despite the blinding evidence to the contrary. So it's not evidence that really converts people. It is the Spirit. And I believe that for most people, this sign kind of opened their eyes and opened their hearts to the fact that it could all be real. And then the Holy Spirit was the one that really converted them, that really taught them the truth. Because they were open-hearted, because of this earth-shattering sign that happened before their eyes. But again, Satan was able to get some, which is mind-blowing. Imagine seeing the sign for yourself, a believer or an unbeliever. Personally, I would not be able to deny it. Like, holy crap, it was bright all night. That doesn't happen. And it happened in the time frame that another prophet of God specified it would. How much more specific can you get? What else could God have done here? Like, he's trying his best, and there are still some that Satan is able to catch. That's insane. That blows my mind. Oh my gosh. And also, it's interesting that it notes that there are actually some people that start to preach, hey, now we don't have to follow the law of Moses anymore. This is great. Like, it's been fulfilled. We're done. You know? And it's interesting also that it explains, well, these people were in error because the law of Moses hadn't been completely fulfilled yet, which I assume was done in the atonement. But anyways, it's just kind of funny to show that, like, yeah, everyone saw the same sign, everyone understood the same general thing from it, but some kind of took stuff from it that wasn't 100% correct, and they needed some correction. Like, isn't that funny? You know, like these little splinter groups, these little misunderstandings or misconstruings or misinterpretations of gospel, like, it happens in real life, and it just feels so real that after this earth-shattering sign, some would be like, okay, well, this prophecy has been fulfilled, check, now we don't have to do Mosaic law things anymore. We're good. You know? Which is so interesting, and I mean, the Mosaic Law is still in effect to some degree. I mean, we still follow the Ten Commandments, we still follow a lot of the laws, but the performance-based ones, you know, were kind of done away with in the Council of Jerusalem in Acts. But anyways, it's kind of funny that there were a lot of people that clearly knew the scriptures, that clearly understood a lot of things about the gospel, but just had one thing wrong. You know? That's just kind of fun. I just kind of love that. And then they were corrected, and then they came to the true church. Like, look at that. Bravo. You know, it's a lot of fun. So, anyways, let's continue to see how this sign keeps changing Nephite culture, because now most of them are believers. So, things are going to be changing. A lot of baptisms have already happened, and it says in verse 23 that there was a great remission of sins. So, not just there was a remission of sins, but that the remission of sins was great. And thus the 92nd year did pass away, bringing glad tidings unto the people because of the signs which did come to pass, according to the words of the prophecy of all the holy prophets. And it came to pass that the 93rd year did also pass away in peace, save it were for the Gadianton robbers, who dwelt upon the mountains, who did infest the land. For so strong were their holds and their secret places, that the people could not overpower them. Therefore they did commit many murders, and did do much slaughter among the people. And it came to pass that in the 94th year, they began to increase to a great degree, because there were many dissenters of the Nephites who did flee unto them, which did cause much sorrow unto those Nephites who did remain in the land. And there was also a cause of much sorrow among the Lamanites, for behold, they had many children who did grow up and began to wax strong in years, and they became for themselves, and were led away by some who were Zoramites by their lyings and their flattering words to join those Gadianton robbers. And thus were the Lamanites afflicted also, and began to decrease as to their faith and righteousness, because of the wickedness of the rising generation. It's always interesting when massive spiritual events happen in the Book of Mormon, that it's always the rising generation that didn't experience it firsthand, that are the first kind of cracks to show. After King Benjamin's speech to the people, this amazing sermon that he gave at the temple that lasted for 3 chapters, that was like life-changing for a lot of people. The people who remembered that in their lifetimes never fell away, but it was their kids that didn't hear the words of King Benjamin that began to disbelieve. And that's happening here now. Those that weren't there physically for the sign of Christ's coming are the first to fall away, because they don't have that concrete thing to look back on and be like, yes, I felt the Spirit at this time. Like, this was Christ coming to me and showing me the truth of all things. They just don't have that anchoring experience. And it's also interesting that it's only when the Nephites get majority righteous again that people start to kind of descend away to the Gadianton robbers again, right? Like, they're still around, but they haven't really been mentioned in a while, probably because they didn't do anything huge, besides, obviously, continual murders and plunders and, doing their usual Gadianton robber things. But it didn't seem like people were really dissenting to them for a while, which is weird because the Nephites were wicked, right? Like, they were doing bad things, so why didn't they go to where the wicked people go? And my theory is that they were already descended from the Nephites as Nephites. Like, they didn't have to change anything about their allegiance to be a dissenter because, well, everyone around them believed the same incorrect things that they did. And now the people that believe incorrect things in Zarahemla are in the vast minority. And so they feel out of place and probably ostracized by their believer friends and neighbors. And so they go to where the wicked people go, And so it is the culture of Zarahemla that has changed, and that pushed some people out. They didn't feel understood anymore. They didn't feel at home anymore because everyone else's beliefs changed when they got new information, but theirs didn't. Which, it should have, because a sign of Christ's coming came, but, to each their own. And to some, it's murder, and to others, it's righteousness. So, what can you do? Anyways, holy crap, this was quite the chapter. Like, so much happened. Nephi is starting out his book with a bang, I will say. But anyways, so to sum up, the unbelieving Nephites set a death date for all the believers that if the sign didn't happen before that date, they would be killed. It did happen, miraculously, and a lot of people were converted, but some weren't. And, a few years after the sign happened, there are some other people that dissent, and their kids aren't super believing. So, yeah, we basically get an earth-shattering miracle, a sign from the heavens that Christ, the Redeemer of the world, has been born, and then the end of the chapter kind of ends on a downer. Isn't that crazy? This earth-shattering sign changed an entire generation of Nephites, and it's just kind of something that happened. Just kind of passed by. It's just kind of over with now. And now people are once again dissenting as they usually do. How crazy is that? And I'm sure that a lot of the Nephites that were initially converted by the sign stayed steady. But not everyone was initially converted. And even then, there were some that dissented, it said, to the Gadianton robbers. And even then, their kids aren't quite as strong as they are. So anyways, it's wild to me that the chapter in the middle has this miraculous holy event. And the chapter just kind of ends on a, well, they weren't doing super great. That's wild to me. But, it is something that the Nephites have always struggled with. The pride cycle, And not that this is specifically the pride cycle, but they've always struggled with wickedness, right? They've never been 100% perfectly there. So, yeah, such is the malady of the Nephites, it seems. So, the standout verse is going to be verse 8, which says, "But behold, they did watch steadfastly for that day and that day, which should be as one day, as if there were no night, that they might know that their faith had not been in vain." So I'm sure that you remember when I talked about Alma 32, way back when. Alma talks a lot about how faith cannot be a perfect knowledge. Like, if faith is knowledge, it ceases to be faith. But in his chapter, Alma mentions something very important. He says, if you plant the word as a seed in your life, and you let it grow, you come at the gospel with an open mind, and you see what fruits it develops, then you will see that the word is good. And that you can be sure of. You cannot have perfect knowledge that God is real, because then you wouldn't have faith in God. But you can have a perfect knowledge that the fruits of the gospel are real. That the results of your experiment of planting this word in your life were good. And so what that teaches me is that we can have concrete footholds in our faith. And while we may not be 100% certain that God is real, we can be 100% certain that we had this experience, or that we saw this thing, or that we felt this way at this time. Those are things that we can be sure of. This reminds me of when people talk about biblical archaeology, right? We have archaeological evidence for the Bible, a lot of people say, but not for the whole Bible. We have archaeological evidence that the people and the places were real, but we don't have archaeological evidence that Christ miraculously healed people, or that he walked on water, or that the Red Sea was parted by Moses. We don't have evidence for that. But we can be sure that Jerusalem existed, that there was a temple, that there was probably someone named Jesus Christ who did live in the time that the Bible says he did. And even though those don't directly say, hey, God is divine and you should worship him, those do say, there's some truth in these words. Maybe we should pay attention. Maybe we should focus on what they say. So to bring it back to this verse, the believers in Zarahemla that have this death date kind of looming over them, it says that they did watch steadfastly that they might know that their faith had not been in vain. So they're waiting for that moment. They're waiting for that anchor for their faith because they know, hey, once I see this sign, I will know that that sign happened. And I will know that I'm on the right path. And that can be an anchor for their faith. That can be something that they fall back on. That can be something that they remember. And it can be something that they rely on in their testimony. And that's what they're waiting for. They're looking to see that they might know that their faith was not in vain. And the fact that they know doesn't invalidate the fact that they have faith. Because again, their knowledge is not in God's existence. Their knowledge is in the fact that there was this sign. And so I love that faith is this balance between literal knowledge of like experiences that you have that are anchoring to you, and this faith, this hope, this trust that God is real and that he loves you. Anyways, I just love how faith works, and I love that these believers are exhibiting that. They're like, hey, I'm excited. I'm going to have this experience that's going to anchor me, that's going to hold me tightly in this faith that I will never leave. This thing that I will be able to rely on throughout my entire life. This thing that I will be able to remember and cherish and hold close to me. And we should look for things like that in our lives as well. I've taken to writing down whatever spiritual experiences that I have that are distinct. And I'm sure that many of you as well. There have been conference talks about this, talking about how we need to remember spiritual anchor points like this, to keep them close to us, and to rely on them when we're struggling. This is a very common thing, and it's a very powerful thing as well. So again, whenever you have experiences that feel like they're concrete, that feel real to you, that you can be sure happened, write them down. Remember them. Document them. Because then you'll be able to look back on them with a surety that they happened, just like these Nephites did. Because like I said, it doesn't seem to be the Nephites that saw the sign and were converted that fell away. There were some that weren't converted at the time, and those were probably the ones that eventually dissented. And then their kids also seemingly are a little bit more rebellious. But the people who saw the sign and believed stayed. They had that concrete anchor. They were able to hold on to that experience for the rest of their lives. May we look for experiences like that ourselves. Anyways, yeah, that is the episode for today. I hope you enjoyed, because holy crap, this is a touchstone chapter in the Book of Mormon. Oh my goodness, it's so good. I just want to keep reading it again and again. But anyways, there's a link down in the show notes. It's my link tree. It's where you can access everything that I'm connected to. So you can find my Instagram, my YouTube page. Both of those places are where I post my short form content. So if you want to find more stuff that are Book of Mormon related, go ahead and check those out. You can also find my Substack, where if you want to get blog posts about different Book of Mormon chapters in your email inbox, you can subscribe there. You can also donate to me if you really appreciate the work that I do, because I do this literally just for fun as a passion project. And yeah, finally, you can read the Book of Mormon for yourself for free. So if you want an online copy of the Book of Mormon, go ahead and click that link, go read it, go annotate, go make notes, go make a study plan, enjoy. Anyways, click that link, all your wildest dreams will come true. And yeah, that's all I've got for you today. I'll talk to you later. Bye.